Welcome back to another classic movie review. Today, going to be reviewing a 1983 television movie directed by the great Alan Clarke, written by the screenwriter David Leland. This movie, called Made in Britain, stars Tim Roth as this crazy, mischievous skinhead. Now, as I just said, it is a television movie. It was not released in the theatres. Subsequently, a version of this movie is actually available on YouTube currently, due to its great acting performances, mainly from a young Tim Roth. The movie has basically, over time, through word of mouth and stuff like that, and then subsequently through DVD releases, this movie has basically built up a cult following, and rightfully so. It really is a fantastic piece of work from Alan Clarke and Tim Roth, who is the lead actor in this movie. He plays the skinhead Trevor. It's clear to see that the character of Trevor, played by Tim Roth, is clearly just a lost guy. He's just lost completely and yearning for something to belong to. So he's latched onto the skinhead movement. He's, being mischievous and trying to have this kind of bravado, and a young Tim Roth with, limited acting credits to his name at that point, giving a fantastic performance as Trevor. You feel it, it gets to you, and I just wish, you could get Trevor and just kind of shake him and slap him and just say, wake up, just stop, because we all have bad days and stuff like that. And the character of Trevor, this lost youth, this, it's representation of one of many at that time that were basically, the system just let them down. There was no real help available, and if there was help, it was very limited. And it's just basically an hour and a half of the subsequent downfall of his character of Trevor, where he's yearning, it's a cry for help. He's doing all this stuff, he's sniffing glue, and sadly throughout this movie he can't find it. He doesn't find it, and he just goes further and further down a path that basically gives him no future going forward. So it is a very tragic tale, Made in Britain, but also a very important film. And as I've mentioned, I've watched this movie over the years several times. It stays with you, and as I get older, it becomes even more significant, because you really see how the system can just be so neglectful, and you can just, it really is heart-wrenching at times. But a very important film, and one of Alan Clarke's absolute best pieces of work. Alan Clarke was synonymous throughout his career with basically working with the BBC, but this particular project was actually made for ITV Central. So ITV Studios, now they've rebranded. Recently, I think about 5 years ago, there was a Alan Clarke box set released, which basically contained the majority of Alan Clarke's work, which was funded and produced under the BBC banner. Made in Britain was actually not included into that box set, and you can still get it in a standalone DVD on release. But it's strange, because Made in Britain, the look of it, the feel of it, it works so well with the other BBC productions that he did. But just worth mentioning that this particular production was actually for ITV Studios. And I don't believe Alan Clarke actually ever produced any other projects for ITV after this. So this is pretty much just a one and done. And then after this, he continued to work for the remainder of his career for the BBC. We see the character of Trevor being sent to an assessment centre, and he's causing havoc. He's kicking doors, he's being rude to staff, and it basically just escalates from there. Ultimately, the character is sent to a borstal, which in today's terms we would say a youth detention centre. And the character at the very end of the movie doesn't really even seem that bothered. He's just kind of, as I said, he's lost. The character of Trevor is almost in this alternate reality where, okay, bring on the punishment, I don't really care, because I've basically given up on myself. And that's a tragic kind of thing to witness throughout this movie. Clearly, the character of Trevor is not an idiot. Trevor has a brain, but the character is just very misguided. He has this kind of, he has this poor behaviour, but for me, as I see it, is clearly a cry for help, because he's going through this kind of system where he's basically being treated like a number. Nobody's really taken the time to investigate the root cause of Trevor's issues, whether it be if he was, sexually assaulted as a kid, or he's got trauma from, other past, experiences. It's never really investigated by anyone within the system. And yeah, he's treated like a number, and through that he becomes very resentful. And then you get this kind of spiral of like him just resenting everyone, hating the world, as I said, being completely reckless without any abandonment for himself or anyone around him. And it's quite a tragic tale, because clearly in various scenes the character of Trevor is articulate, he can get his point across, but as I said, misguided. But once again, Tim Roth really brings it here, and he brings such an authentic performance. It's so believable, and given the style in which the movie was filmed, very low budget, like a lot of Alan Clarke's work, it almost has this kind of realism like nothing else, this kind of documentary style, so to speak. Tim Roth is lost within the character of Trevor, and you just see Trevor. The movie is a criticism of the young offender system that was implemented at the time in Britain in the early 80s. The movie suggests there's more to these young offenders than meets the eye. As I mentioned, they're just another number, and they're just going through the system. And the people who are in charge of these institutions, these borstalls, are neglectful of these kids, and there's many harrowing stories throughout the years of the real life tragic tales of kids being sexually assaulted in borstalls. And yeah, the movie is saying that we shouldn't dismiss these youths and treat them like numbers and maintain this heartless attitude towards them. From my understanding, over the years the system has improved, and projects like Scum and Made in Britain, which explored this and highlighted the flaws within the system for the young offenders. I believe certain conditions have improved over the years, so to a certain extent, full credit to Alan Clarke for his work in exposing what was such a heartless system. Even though mental illness is not really a theme that's touched upon in Made in Britain, from my understanding, the character does show signs of poor mental health. And yeah, there's no real mention of medication or anything of that nature in this movie, yet the character is clearly unhinged, and looking into today's standards, he clearly has mental health issues. And I guess really that was a sign of the times, because the movie was made in, I believe, in 1982. It was broadcast in 1983, and it's very much, and Made in Britain is very much a perspective of the time and exploring what was going on. But at that time, there was very limited awareness of mental health and medication and such things that is so more well known today. So in that sense, it does date the movie, because really there should have been, I mean, if you put that movie in today's standards, there would be, likely Trevor would be on medication, or if he was on medication, there would be an argument if he's ever been offered medication. But there's other opportunities out there now, which is a good thing. But clearly the Trevor character, played by Tim Roth, has mental health issues, and that basically goes unaddressed throughout this movie. As I mentioned, Tim Roth is absolutely fantastic in this role. It's an Oscar-winning performance, yet of course this was a television movie, not eligible for Oscar nominations, but it really is one of those movies that just leaves you with such an imprint, like wow, Tim Roth, he's had a great career, being in Pulp Fiction and various other movies. I admit I've seen only a limited number of Tim Roth movies, and this, I'm sure if I delve deeper into his filmography, I'm sure I would find more recent roles of him that he's been fantastic in. But just from the limited filmography that I've seen of Tim Roth, this is his absolute best performance. I've seen nothing else that tops this from him. And it's quite crazy because this was such a early role in his career. He'd only starred in a few other films at this point in the early 80s. So he delivered his greatest performance, before his career really took off. That's basically what I'm saying. I'm sure there's movies out there that he's been just as good. I've just not seen them. Yeah, this movie revolves around Trevor, of course, and he is a skinhead. But to be honest, this is not really a skinhead movie in terms of the culture of skinhead. There are other movies out there that are much more skinhead central, like Romper Stomper from 1992, starring Russell Crowe, compared to this. Yet this movie, made in Britain, does get kind of lumped in with skinhead movies, and it's really more of a portrayal of a lost youth that just so happens to adopt the skinhead look. It's really just more of a coincidence, really. With this project here, Alan Clark begins his use of the Steadicam. His use of Steadicam became a signature feature of his projects going forward. Over the years, he really did become a master of the Steadicam. Filmmakers such as Stanley Kubrick had used it as well previously in movies like The Shining, where you've got kind of the long corridor shots and the camera's kind of following around. Like all things that evolve, Alan Clark took that and crafted it and made these movies, which were very heavy on the use of Steadicam and the dynamic use of it. It's fantastic, and it really does raise the bar in terms of, even though it is a small production, it's low budget, it has that grainy documentary type feel, the use of Steadicam and the continued use of Steadicam throughout this movie, it just sets it apart from other television projects at the time. There's a great scene I quickly want to mention. So Trevor goes off the rails and he basically ends up walking through a tunnel shirtless, and he's got, there's traffic on the other side passing by. We have the camera, it just kind of, as Trevor is walking towards the camera, it just follows, it's just walking back, and Tim Roth just looking so fed up and just so angry in his heart. There's no real dialogue other than some car going past and Trevor's like, "Oh, wanker!" But that sequence has always stayed with me. It's one of when I think of Alan Clark, there's certain imagery that's imprinted in my brain, and that's one of them. An image of Tim Roth as the skinhead in Made in Britain, 1983, walking in that tunnel, and it's just a haunting sequence. Really, really is, and absolutely fantastic filmmaking from Alan Clark. So overall, if you guys have seen it, please let me know what you guys thought of it in the comments below. As I said, this movie currently is on YouTube to watch for free, so if you guys are interested, please do. If you've got a spare hour and a half, go check it out. It's definitely worth seeing, but it is a dark, tragic tale of a helpless youth that just wants help, and unfortunately he doesn't get it in this movie. I always kind of wish there was maybe some sort of sequel to this where we see the character of Trevor maybe somehow, some way, I don't know, get his life together, get a family, and maybe then he's got new issues to deal with. But the ambiguity, how the movie is left, does give the audience hope, I guess, to think, oh, maybe he's young enough that he's got enough time to maybe see sense and not hurt himself, not hurt others, and maybe get out of that system, and maybe eventually find a job and find purpose in his life. But this is one of Alan Clark's best works. If you're a fan of Alan Clark's work, if you've seen any of his work and not this is a must watch, absolutely. If I'm going to rank it, ranking wise, I will give it I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. Tim Roth is absolutely fantastic, and he owns this movie. It's one of his best, in my opinion, it's his best performance he ever gave. And yeah, absolutely 100%. Go check it out if you've not seen this. the fact that Alan Clark died only a few years after this, yeah, I'm glad that we got to see such productions like Made in Britain, yet I'm kind of sad that we never got to see even more going forward.
Like, subscribe.